Hi, folks. I hope you've got some good space in your head and you clear your minds, ventilate the questions. I will try and get to all of them. There's a lot of content to get through here, and I'm going to be sharing everything that we are doing both in South Africa, in the United States, in the UK, and in Europe. To give you a sense, in South Africa, we've worked with over 2,300 odd business owners, running businesses anywhere from 10 million up to about 300-400 million a year. In the United States and in the UK and in the EU, all our attention's been focused on the $1 to $30 million a year annual revenue business. They're all going through different forms of COVID economy, but for one thing, everybody had plans at the beginning of the year to really build their businesses. From a South African perspective, it looked like we had started to shed the legacy, the very early stage. We've early started to shed the legacy of the Zoom administration. We were getting into a more stable socio-political environment. The economy was next on the agenda to tackle, and there's not one business owner I know who wasn't starting this year with really good growth plans. And then suddenly, bang, we got punched in the face by COVID. It was Mike Tyson who said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And he was absolutely right. He was always being asked, what is your strategy? What is your plan for your next fight? And he said, punch them in the mouth. Punch them in the mouth? What kind of plan is that? And he said, it's one that disrupts everything that they thought they were going to do. And it gives me control over that fight. And he was absolutely right. Until his second to last fight that he had with Evander Holyfield was preceded with a no-name brand chap called Buster Douglas. They were expecting it to last 30 seconds, 40 seconds. In the 8th round, Mike Tyson knocked Buster to the ground. In the 10th round, Buster Douglas was the first fighter in history to beat Mike Tyson. The lesson there is, yes, everyone has a plan until you're punched in the mouth, but winners get up. What I'm going to be sharing with you today is a fighting strategy for your business. So the first thing we need to do is take a view on the future. And it's really important that you take a single view and commit to that view, because the amount of noise that's emerging, the amount of noise we're being exposed to, creates a huge amount of anxiety and confusion. Take a single view and let that view be the worst case scenario view. And in that, let's hope for a far better outcome. But if we prepared for the worst and anything beyond our expectations improves, we should be winning. So let's look at it starting from June 2021. In June 2021 is when I think most of the COVID economy will be behind us. What I'm looking at over here is a graph showing us what the American economy rollout looks like. They expect to be testing around 1 million people a day in late July. It's the Abbott test. It's a very quick test. It's a very efficient test. It's a 3 to 5 second test. They're expecting the first vaccines to come out in the later part of this year. I think it's ambitious, but nonetheless, that's their forecasting. It will be given to healthcare workers and vulnerable people first. And eventually, as they get through the second stage of winter for them, their second winter with COVID, they're expecting the vaccine to be available in March next year, March, April next year. As to when we will get the vaccine, I don't know. But what we have learned from this is that it's likely to take around 24 months from where we are. The South African environment, thank heavens, has taken a view that lives are more important than anything else. Within that, we have the hard shutdown, and the easing back into the economy will be driven by 3 guiding principles: the economic value of a sector, the economic stress caused by a sector not being enabled, and finally, the transmission risk typical to that sector. And I'm really sad and sorry to say, through no fault of yours, mine, or anyone else's, the transmission risk in the tourism business is high for obvious reasons. Hotels, flights, shuttles, transport, it's likely to be one of these sectors that will open last. We've come out of stage 5. We're going into stage 4. There's a bit of uncertainty around what it means, but the view that I want to share with you is this. Build and get ready to fight for 24 months. Anything better than that means you will be ahead, I promise you, of all your competitors. In order to create a little bit of distance from our own businesses, to objectify things slightly, let's just run through an analogy, a very useful analogy to remind us what our actual jobs are. If we look to build our business in the same way that we would sail a ship, it gives us some good correlations. In the first instance, every ship leaves from somewhere to sail to a destination. The clarity of that destination is essential. When you leave and set sail, if you're not sure where you're sailing to and you run out of food, fuel, and water, it simply means that you end your journey lost out at sea. Clarity on destination is critical. And I'm asking you to all think for a minute. Where are you effectively building your business towards? What is your end game? In my history, in my experience, and statistically it's been shown that there are only 2 end games for every business. It's a sale or it's closure. Next, once you understand what that end game is, you need to navigate yourself towards it. Hope is not a strategy, I promise you. Articulating a path, thinking it through, figuring out how you're going to find the shortest route to get to that destination is critical. And for that to happen, you have navigators on a ship. And navigators plot the performance of the ship from its point of departure towards its destination. Next, you have a crew. Sailing a ship without a crew is, I promise you, impossible, unless it's a small little Hobie cat or something along those lines. But I'm imagining that most of us are looking for more than just a Hobie cat. Finally, you have an engine room and a bridge. So if you look at this picture over here, this is the Calypso with Jacques Cousteau. And everyone, for a long period of time, in learning and watching Jacques Cousteau on TV, was inspired to become a marine biologist. So you have the engine room down here. It's below decks, as you can see over here. It propels the ship. It's responsible for propulsion. Then you have the bridge up at the top. And the bridge gives you a 360-degree view. You have instruments. You can see what lies ahead. What the bridge does is give you direction. Propulsion without direction is as problematic as having direction without propulsion. Propulsion is what you need to get your crew to deliver. Direction is what you, as the leader, the captain of the ship, needs to ensure is in play so you can get from A to B in the shortest period of time. As we stand right now, there is not one business that is not sailing in the sea. And there's not one sea that is not tempestuous and full of storms. It, however, does not mean that you change your destination. It simply means that you might adjust your path, you might adjust your sails, you're going to move with the rudder in order to avoid the particularly bad storms or the particularly big waves. Your path from getting from A to B needs to change. It's simply that. B, the destination, should never. The reason it's so important is because if you're clear on why you're doing what you're doing, it starts to give you the mechanisms to build confidence, certainty, and clarity around the decisions you take today in the midst of this storm with the view to arrive at your destination in the long term. What should it be? So I've always believed, as someone who has built businesses, as someone who invests in businesses, I only believe that there's one destination, and that is to build your business into an asset. It's got 3 characteristics. The first is it can appreciate in its capital value. Think of it this way. As an investor, you buy a share on the stock exchange for 50 Rand. You might choose to sell it for 300 Rand 3-5 years later. The 50 to 300 difference, the 250 Rand, is a capital gain. We should all be striving to grow the capital value of our businesses for the simple reason that we invest everything we have in building them with the view that of a day, should we be able to sell it successfully, we secure our pension, we secure our legacy, and we secure our wealth. The next element is income. The share that you bought should be generating dividends, hopefully on an annual basis. Dividends are the free cash that exist from period to period that you hold that share. Dividends for us are both dividends in real terms, but also salaries. And finally, an asset is something tradable. And by that I mean it can be bought and sold. And I want you to think for a minute. Here's a question that should be asked. What does tradability mean? How do you get it out of a business? Well, surely if the business is done well, surely if it's producing revenue, it's tradable. As an investor, as a buyer of businesses, I look to see the cause of the growth. And if I see that you are the cause of the growth, and it is you selling the business to me, then I know it's not an asset, because it depends entirely on you. To the extent that you can get your business to grow in capital value, generate income, and be independent of you, is the extent to which you get success in a sale. Here's a stat. In the United States of America, without a doubt, one of the most supportive environments for businesses, 94.6% of businesses started never get sold. They close at great cost to the business owner, their family, the staff, and everyone within that environment. Frightening stat comes from the IRS, and everyone but the president takes the IRS very, very seriously in the US.
Pavlo, just to come in on that specific one, we've got a question here that I think is very relevant. James is asking, why should every business be an asset? Why is it important? Because sometimes, well, I would like to build a lifestyle business. You know, that's quite a difference we've seen in a few. So that's just James's question. You want to add something to that?
Yeah, you know, Johan, if I think back to a business that we worked with not so long ago, we finished with them about 2 years ago. The one chap was an engineer, an industrial engineer, an electronic engineer, and the other was a CA. And the two of them had probably about 3 years before acquired a business. And they came to see me and said, look, could we work with you? And I said, well, what growth rates do you want to attain? And they said, no, we're not looking for growth. I said, what are you looking for? They said, we're looking for lifestyle. And I said, just explain this to me, lifestyle? And they said, Pavlo, we want to build a business that would grow at around 12, 13, 14% a year on a compound basis, and in which we can take 4 months off a year each whilst the business continues to trade. Now, here's the thing. That particular business was selling fasteners. So it's the screws and the bits and the bobs and the ties, everything related to tying things together, holding things together. I think they had something like 8,600 line items. There was a lot of small bits and pieces in it, a complicated business. We opted to work with them because when they understood that an asset doesn't necessarily only have to have growth as its full reason to exist, it's the tradability, the independence of the business owner that appealed to them. So if you're looking for lifestyle, certainly growth might not be your primary objective, but the one thing you need to get right, if you want a business that is a lifestyle business, in other words, will earn income for you, giving you time in order to do other things too, it still needs to be built on the principles of an asset. So moving on, how do you get control of yourself? Because that's the starting point. When you're the captain of the ship and that storm hits you, you cannot lead if you yourself aren't leading yourself first. And for that, I want to share a really remarkable piece of work that was done. It was done by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, an American-Swiss psychologist. She was a bereavement counselor more than anything else. She is, in effect, the Mother Teresa, but from a data point of view. And she spent her life understanding what people go through when they lose a loved one, someone close to them. She developed the Kubler-Ross change curve, and she said that when you see someone you love, someone who's dear to you, is possibly going to die, you go through a terrible period of denial. You then, as realize that it is inevitable, go through a period of frustration, and that frustration is largely as a result that you have no control over the issue. And it translates into anger and fear. And that frustration dumps you into a well of depression. Getting out of that depression requires a lot of experimentation. In other words, you've got to try and do things differently. You've got to try different things to find meaning and value in your life without that person. Hopefully, if you have got guidance, if you've got the right community around you, you migrate out of that depression through experimentation, you see what works, and eventually you integrate that into your life. Now, it might sound dramatic, but for most business owners that I know who find their meaning, find their value, find their creative expression, find their income from the businesses that they have started or that they've acquired and that they're busy building, the threat of loss is tantamount to the loss of a loved one. Use this curve and use this understanding to understand where you are in the change environment, in the grieving cycle. We had businesses, we had plans. Some of us have really good businesses pre-corona, and some of us are facing very, very dire circumstances post-corona, especially given the 24 months we have ahead of us. If you are in a frustration phase, safe be it to say, you will lead and you will guide through anger and fear. If you're in depression, you will lead and guide through negativity. The way to migrate out of this is to begin through action, doing things differently. And I'm going to give you a plan to get that right. The second thing to take away from this is everyone you lead is going through some form of this curve. There are different stages based on their circumstances, based on their psychologies. Beyond your staff, your suppliers, and most valuably, your customers are equally going through this curve. In a time of crisis, to get your message through, you need to have empathy for the person you're speaking to. If they feel heard and understood by you, they will trust you far quicker, and most importantly, they will hear what you have to say. The way that I navigated myself through this, and the number of crises that I've certainly faced in building businesses, has been to use truths, because truths anchor you. In a very, very noisy, confusing environment, truths bring you back down to earth fast. And there are only a few. The first, for example, is that you are born. Next, you will die. Next, you cannot change another person. And if any of you think that you can, I'm waiting to see. Because what I've learned certainly is that only another person can choose to change themselves. Next, we've always lived in a world of great uncertainty. You know, Johan, I'm doing a lot of work at the moment, as you know, in the US and in the UK. The UK don't realize how good they've had it for the last 5 years. And when I speak to those business owners, the sense of dread and fear that they are going through compared to business owners that I'm speaking with in South Africa is very different. As South Africans, we are used to uncertainty. We've lived in it for the last 5-7 years. Between the Zuma administration, between economic policy that isn't working, and between Eskom, we've still managed to build businesses and we've still managed to get growth. The is sacred. Not what could have been, not what should have been, not what might have been. And for this reason, I implore you, please don't focus on social media. Social media is divisive. It's mostly locked and loaded with blame. If it's not that, it's mostly locked and loaded with commentary that is all about being positive, but not having your feet firmly on the ground. In other words, wishful thinking. It creates confusion, it creates anxiety, and it has the ability to move you back into a negative cycle of the Kubler-Ross curve. Lastly, the only thing you have 100% control over is your attitude. And it's my view, given that we only have 24 hours in the day and we only have a short life to live, the only thing you should pay attention to is something you have control over. Sitting and bemoaning the fate of who's in on level 4 and who's not, and Corona itself, and whether the Chinese lied or didn't, and if only this, and if only that, completely disempowers you, because those questions put you in a position where you are disempowered. If you see that as the cause for your circumstances, then you are disempowered. However, if you say, the only thing I will pay attention to is what I have control over, then the attitude you hold towards the next 24 months is vital. Because if that attitude leads to certain behavior as a result of that thinking and attitude that gives you a result that's not working, you have the power to change the attitude, to change the behavior, and to manifest a different result. We are in control of our destinies, and we are in control of our destinies depending on our attitudes. I'm imploring to all of you, this is the time now where you get off the bridge back into the engine room to restart that engine. It's a time now that we're going to fight like a warrior would at the battlefront, from the front line, to look after our businesses. So where do we begin? Well, let's understand our business and that of our clients too. Remember, I go back to the empathy. And the way I want to do this and give you a framework to do this is as follows. If you look at an onion, it's got 3 primary layers to it. You've got the center sweetness of the onion. You've got the middle burny layer, and that burny sweet combination makes onions delicious. And then you've got the outer layer, which is the skin, mostly, which you discard. So if you look at your business like that, and if you interpret your business as being more than just the business, but being you, being your history, being your skills, being your relationships, being the business itself and everything in it, I refer to that as your complete asset stack. Look at the inner layer and understand what is core and strategic. And your strategy there is to hold and guard it. So let me give you a good example. We do some very interesting work with a business owner whose business we've been working with for over a year or so, who is involved in business intelligence. Effectively, what they do is they get data out of the industrial economy, and then they take that data, slice and dice it, and turn it into intelligence that their clients use in order to better guide the performance of their own businesses and to better guide the strategy of growth in their own businesses. If you think about what that business has that's core and strategic, without those 2 things, it cannot exist. It cannot trade again, ever, if it loses the core and strategic aspects of its business. The first thing it needs is talent and skill to get data, slice and dice it, and interpret it. The second thing it needs is to take that interpreted data and design it and shape it and present it visually so that the clients can get access to the data, use it, consume it, and get the benefit from it. Without those 2 skills, that business cannot exist. Without, let's say, the software that's used in order to do the design and the software that supports the slicing and dicing, it cannot exist. So the people involved in slicing and dicing and design, the software that gets used, are fundamentally core to that business. The next layer is the middle layer, and that middle layer is non-core but strategic. So let's think of it from this perspective. In order to do that work, that business needs good hardware. It needs good computing hardware. But acquiring the hardware, managing the hardware, optimizing the hardware, ensuring the connectivity, optimizing the performance between piece of hardware computer to piece of hardware printer, for example, that is absolutely strategic. Without that, the inner layer cannot function. But does that business need to own that talent and that capability internally? It's non-core because their skills lie predominantly in the core inner layer, but it's strategic because without that, the core inner layer can't function. Yet it is another service provider's opportunity to have the ability to acquire the hardware, optimize it, manage it, increase its efficiency, and provide it as a service to this particular business. That is a partnering relationship. Finally, the outermost layer, everything that's non-core, everything that's not strategic. So a good example for that data business, do they need offices? Do they need offices? Or could they perform their data analytics and data visualization capabilities without offices? If they have a good partner to give them the hardware and ensure that the hardware is working well, so their core strategic team can function effectively, well, they thought they did. And what they've learned during the COVID lockdown so far is that those offices, which they always considered to be in the middle layer, are actually in the outermost layer. Losing the offices doesn't harm their business at all. They certainly don't need to own their building. So if you look at your business like that, and you look at it in terms of your people, you look at it in terms of your plant and equipment, you look at it in terms of your relationships. Here's a good example. What is a core strategic relationship and what is a non-core, non-strategic relationship? There was a client the other day who turned around and said to me, his competitor had come to him to acquire his stock because his competitor could not get stock out of China. And that competitor had Pick n Pay as a client. And his question to me was, should he rather go direct to Pick n Pay, this is 3 weeks ago in the middle of lockdown, and take Pick n Pay away from that competitor, or should he supply his competitor with the product? Now, what gets interesting over here, a core strategic relationship is one wherein which you have customers that you've worked with year on year on year on year. You have customers that have grown you and you have grown with. You have customers that have withstood errors, mistakes, and mishaps in your service and product, and yet stuck by you as you have stuck by them. Is that possible with a retailer? I don't think so. Retailers move from best price to best price. The advice that I certainly gave to that business owner was sell the product to your competitor, but sell it COD, because you want to build a buffer to withstand the next 24 months and let that competitor sell it to Pick n Pay to be paid 90 days later. It's that mindset that you need to apply throughout your entire business. And if you develop this as a technique, it helps you evaluate all your customers too. The next thing,
I want to come in with that. Sorry to interrupt. I know staffing is a real concern at this stage, and it's a tough topic to discuss. So we've had a couple of the questions keep popping up, and these are specifically to the team. Just want to ask from Andrew. He's asking, is culture in your business part of an asset stack, and how do you build good culture, especially in this time?
Yeah, and it's always a good question, because I've got to be honest with you, I've always struggled with culture until the last probably 4 or 5 years. And the reason I've struggled with it, Andrew, is it feels so kind of fuzzy. You can't put your finger on it. There isn't a structure for it necessarily. I've read extensively around it, and still from some of the thought leaders in the world around culture, there's nothing mechanical, there's nothing structural you can do. And if there's no activity that you can measure, I get very concerned, because it might well mean that it's just a waste of time. And yet what happened probably about 2 weeks ago now, I was called by a retailer who, they control 68 stores. They own 68 stores. And his story was that he started the business 22 years ago. He started it with his wife. Their son came into the business about 11 years ago, so they had succession in play already. They had 68 retail stores. They had never taken a dividend in their life. They had only reinvested back into the business. And their plan was to grow to 200 retail stores from the 68. So the COVID economy has really hurt them. Retailers have been hurt very, very hard. He then turned around and said to me, so what we decided to do, I took a 100% pay cut. My wife took a 50% pay cut because we could live off her salary. My son volunteered a 50% pay cut. We went then to go and speak to our senior management team across 4 provinces. He said to me, Pavlo, but before 3 minutes were up in the meeting, they volunteered to take a 30% pay cut each, on condition that they continue to pay their retail staff. And the reason they wanted to do that is because they had relationships with their retail teams. Their retail teams understood the business. They were loyal. They had been there for a long time, which is very unusual in the retail environment. They understood the product. They had customer relationships. They were good folk who, without salaries, might find themselves in very, very dire positions. I look at that, and that's where culture manifests as an asset stack. This business owner had earned that culture through the way he had behaved. So yeah, culture really does count as part of your asset stack. Moving on, talking about empathetic engagement. So empathetic engagement is important because empathy in a time of crisis is crucial. Going back to what I said earlier, if you come to speak to me with a view to engage with me, but you don't take the trouble to connect with me first, I'm really not interested in giving you time, and I'm certainly not interested, or in fact, I'm incapable of hearing anything you have to say. For me to open up to you, for me to engage with you, I first have to see that you understand me and connect to me. So the starting point here, we are not all equal. Some of us are in the high risk, medium risk, and low risk corona economy. If you come to me with a proposition to engage and sell to me, and I'm in a high risk corona environment, as opposed to me being a business that's in a low risk corona environment, can you see that the likelihood of using the same value proposition that you used before, the same method of engagement before, will completely miss the mark for me in high or me in low? All three, high, medium, low, need different ways of engagement. Practicing empathy and understanding what's at risk and what stands to be lost or what stands to be gained for any one of your clients has to be correlated with not only understanding them as an onion, but importantly, what is their risk rating within the corona economy? The next thing is size makes a difference. It really does. So many businesses have been unable to build proper buffer, proper reserves, given Eskom and given the last 5 years of our economy. Size also makes a difference in terms of your team. Much bigger businesses are fortunate in that they've got big management teams. There are lots of brains around the table. There are lots of different perspectives. That business owner has more company as opposed to a smaller business where you might not have the same level or extent of staff capability. So have an empathy for who you're talking to. Talking to me as a 300 million rand a year business, talking to me as a 30 million rand a year business, talking to me as a 3 million rand a year business requires a different level of empathy, a different level of engagement. A one size fits all means that your size will fit nobody. Lastly, you have to understand where your clients are within sector and mindset. Within sector, what I mean is if you're in a very deep supply chain. So for example, if you look at the automotive industry, there are many, many, many layers of value that get added before the motor vehicle is assembled. If you're in a deep, deep supply chain, you need to understand what that client's experience is on the customer side and on the supplier side before you go charging in with your service to them. Because if you don't understand how their supplier performance is affecting their business or how their customers are affecting their business, it's fundamentally clear that you will miss the message. Now compare them to, for example, a hair salon, where really you have very, very, very few suppliers, and then you deal direct with consumers. Or, yeah, those are two very good examples, a shallow sector and a deep sector. From a mindset point of view, let's go back to that hair salon. Let's say the owner of that hair salon is in their mid-60s. The likelihood of them being shut down for another 4 or 5 months is high. They're busy having a monstrous fight with their landlord. They're losing their staff because they can't afford to keep them. And the government is going to provide a bailout for them. If I'm 65 or if I'm 35, who's more likely to say, I've had it, I'm done, I'm out of here, versus I'm going to stick around and fight? Because at 65, if you have to get a loan of R1 million, irrespective of the interest rate, so that you can pay rent for 4 months to keep your premises and keep your business alive without trade, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to settle that loan amount. Surely at 65, I'm going to say, if I can afford to, I'm out. Having an engagement with that mindset is very different to the 35-year-old saying, I'm taking the R1 million, I'm in. Because on top of it, if I can be one of the last businesses standing, I will get the clients and customers of competitors that have chosen to opt out. So use rating impacts, size impacts, and type impacts, along with the inner, middle, and outer core to understand your business, but importantly, to understand customers. Once we've got that, we're setting strategy. So strategy gives you the objectives you need to achieve within a set period of time. The activities to bring strategy to life, I'll discuss after the 3 strategies that you need to get through the corona economy. The first is during lockdown, what do you do? And if your answer is take a holiday, then I feel very, very anxious for you. Because this is a period where you focus your mind on saving your business and resetting it. Suffice to say, the way that you approach the corona economy, with your method of engagement, your skills, your business model, your resources that yielded success, will be fundamentally different to the way that you need to get through the corona economy 24 months from now to a new normalized economy. Firstly, the next 24 months, full of uncertainty. I can promise you the lives of your clients and customers have changed. And if you don't change what you do to meet them in relation to their change, you will lose them. Post-corona, we will never return to the economy we knew. It'll be 70% of normal. So within this period, the first thing you do is you preserve capital. Capital acts as your shock absorber. It allows you to handle 2, 3, 4 months without trade. If you don't have capital, if you don't have a shock absorber, the fact that you've hit a very hard wave and you have no ability to absorb it means that you crack the hull of the ship. It sinks you, in effect. To do that, you must stop all costs that don't kill your business. Remember, you now have a technique to identify what's in the inner layer, the middle layer, the outer layer. You're stopping all costs in the outer layer. You're stopping all costs in the middle layer. You're preserving your assets, capabilities, and talent in that inner layer. Engage your team and digitize. Your team, I promise you, is very apprehensive and nervous. You need to talk to your team and you need to demonstrate leadership. This goes back to why the Kubler-Ross curve is so important. If you have not migrated yourself into a positive place on the Kubler-Ross curve, your leadership and engagement is going to be tainted with either a depressive negative energy or an anxiety-filled, fearful, angry energy in the frustration phase. So engage your team, speak to them frequently, speak to them often, and give them your strategy. To do that, you naturally would have had to digitize. How are you talking to them? Is it WhatsApp alone? Is it regular Zoom group sessions? Do you have ticketing capabilities? Is it Instagram? Is it SMS? Is it email? My suggestion is to use screens, because with screens you can see people, they can see you, and you can read a lot more when you see someone as opposed to just hear their voice. Engage your suppliers and customers with your plan to preserve your business, and sell it to them in a way that it's in their favor too. When you engage your customers, you're getting the money in. When you engage your suppliers, you're looking for terms to settle and pay. Going back to the example of that retailer, Johan, that you asked me about, or the question from Andrew. After he'd spoken to his staff, he went to his supplier out of China. 3 minutes into the phone call, the Chinese supplier said, listen, Mr. Business Owner, and I don't want to share a name, but some of you might know him. Mr. Business Owner, we have been working together for 22 years. The monies that you owe me at the moment, you will settle 30%. The remaining 70% will be deferred over 6 months after you have gotten back to full trade. And in the meantime, I'll continue to supply you with stock. It goes to show the value of culture as an asset stack. And then exhaust all the support. I found this, the funding lockdown. There's a recent website I found that's coming out of Westgrow. And if someone can just find it and send it through on the chat line, I can't remember the name offhand. But there's a really good website that you should be focused on. When we go into the Q&A in the end, I will look for it and post it as well. That is your strategy for RED. Objective, save the business and reset it. Engaging your team means talking to your clients and customers to understand how their circumstances have changed, so you can focus on changing what you have to offer them and in the manner that you offer them. From that, post-lockdown, Friday onward, Amber. It's an amber period. Survive and rebuild. That's your strategy. In that process, you're going to test all the propositions that your customers and clients said would work for them in the reset period. Start crafting your offers, building your services, adjusting the way you market, adjusting the way you sell, adjusting the way you deliver, based on all the knowledge you managed to gain in the reset period, the red reset period. Because truth will only be found in action. You need to try to see what works, to see what doesn't work. It's part of the rebuild process. Then digitize and enable social distancing. If you haven't done it yet, you need to do it now. In the way you market, in the way you sell, in the way you deliver, in the way you engage, in the way you work with your staff. Digitize everything that you possibly can, because the benefits will be, beyond the corona economy, a massive reduction in your operating overheads during the corona economy for the next 24 months. An ability to reach people, communicate with people, and be the first to understand what changes people are going through, so you can respond by crafting your services and offers differently. And then invest in prospecting and efficiency. Prospecting is for your sales teams to start looking at clients of competitors, for example, because if your competitors have not done the work during the reset red period and aren't doing the same work during the amber survive rebuild period, it means your competitors will be the last to be responsive to the changing demands of clients and customers. So look for new clients and customers, build the databases, start the relationships. In your operations and delivery side, look for efficiencies everywhere. How can you do things smarter, quicker, cheaper? Start building systems. Once you have understood what you need to do differently, turn everything into a system. Can we just pause there? A system, activities in a sequence that can be measured, and most importantly, can be taught. If you learn of a different way of marketing your proposition, a different way of converting an inquiry into a customer, a different way of providing delivery and service, in other words, fulfilling your obligations, those activities in a sequence that can be measured must be documented and they must be supported with a job description and targets, and they must be supported with training material. Because if you can start to deliver your new proposition using systems supported by people, it's the early stages of getting you back out the engine room onto the bridge. Again, exhaust all support. 6 months on, we're going into green. It will be the new normal. And during that period, it's about accelerating and reigniting your growth. You want to spend more time leading and less time doing. Red and amber requires you to be at the forefront of everything. The forefront of negotiating with your suppliers, the forefront of negotiating away your fixed costs, and the forefront of leading your team to better understand what you need to do differently post-corona as opposed to what you did before. Set growth targets for everybody. Remember a system. Activities in a sequence that can be measured. You know how to measure the performance of your team now. Set targets around those measures. Get access to funding. From an Auric point of view, we built a massive fund pre-corona, more by luck than anything else, not because of great foresight. We built it in January, and really corona really visited us only late March. We built it because we see the businesses that are left standing 6 months in are going to be able to lap up and eat up and consume the customers, clients, stock, services, talent, plant and equipment of competitors that didn't get to the other side. You want to accelerate sales, and you're going to be looking for value. I go back to the example I shared with you, where this competitor sold to his competitor supplying Pick and Pay the product that he had, and he had sold it for cash, and he had sold it for a 5% premium cash in order to let his competitor carry the 90-day terms of Pick and Pay. It strengthened his position within the strategy of red and weakened his competitor's position within the strategy of red 2. So 3 strategies. We know what to do depending on our risk, our rating, whether we're in lockdown. We know what to do post-lockdown for the first 3 to 6 months. And we know how to set for what we have to have ready after those 6 months. So in each of these, red, amber, and green, what are the activities you need to focus your mind on? And I want to talk about the destination again. Remember, the seas are rough. There are 2 things you need clarity on. Your destination, where you're sailing to, so that you don't land up out at sea without food, fuel, or water. And importantly, how you're going to put your team to good use. Because you alone sailing that vessel is impossible. You need to use your team, because your team have answers that you've never thought of. Let's start. The first,
just to have a look here, we there's some more questions coming up here, and I think it's relevant at this stage where everybody's feeling we kind of need to survive this period before we can do anything else. And you're currently talking about growth, and so Terry's question is quite relevant, where he asks, how can you be thinking of growth in this economy, and especially in South Africa where there hasn't been growth, and where will this growth?
So, Johan, you know what? There has been growth in South Africa. The South African economy hasn't grown. But as you well know, within the Auric environment, the businesses we're working with are running average annual growth rates of just off 30%. And the question then should be, well, where does their growth come from? If you look at any one business, it exists within a community of competing interests. So let's say, for example, there are about 5,000 bakeries in South Africa, and let's say you run a bakery. If 10% of those bakeries opt to grow, and they do, it simply means that they've grown by outcompeting competitors. So the South African economy hasn't grown. Baking as a whole in South Africa might not have grown, but the fact that you have taken your competitors from 5,000 to 4,900, because through your efficiency, through your growth mindset, through your activities, you outperformed either on product or price or service, or understanding problems, understanding how to create experiences around the baking goods that you sell and service. You've taken away the business of competitors and claimed it for yourself. So if you're not thinking with that mindset, the harsh reality is you have competitors in this country thinking with that mindset. Growth does not come from the general economy. When you're a very big business, it does. But for us, businesses doing between 5 upwards to 300 million a year, we have control over our own growth. And we have that control by building our businesses to be more effective, more competitive, more efficient, more relevant, more proactive. All the features I've shared with you set you apart. So going back to it, the three strategies, what are the activities you need to perform in each of those activities? Distinction from competitors. Why do you exist as a business? Do you exist to sell a product? Because any product you have, I'll have tomorrow. Do you exist because of your price? Because any price you have, I'll beat tomorrow. Do you exist of your service? What does that mean? If service means you, well, then have you created an asset? Because if you are the proximate cause of your business existing, it means by definition you have no asset. In many ways, if you think about it, and think about yourselves, you only buy anything that solves a problem for you and does so in an experience that matches your requirements. That's why we exist. And distinction means you cannot be everything to everyone. The extent to which you're prepared to narrow down who you focus on solving problems for deepens your understanding of their problems, deepens your understanding of the experience they need to have the problem solved. And that's the edge of competition. Because whoever it is you decide to serve, if they collectively make a big enough market for you, you will learn and own and earn dominance in that market alone, because you're selling products, you're selling services on the basis of how people see themselves spending money. And that is having my problem solved through a very particular experience. I go back to it. The problems and the experience required to solve problems in the mining sector are very different to that in the hospitality sector. When someone says to me, I focus on corporates, I immediately know they're trying to be everything to everyone. And that means you're either going to be playing in the product category or the price category. And in that, there is no profitability. So in this phase over here, distinction, red phase, get your team to talk to your customers. Get them to understand the changed economics of your customers, the changed behavior of your customers. Get them to understand it deeply so that you can reset and rebuild a manner of serving them that will be cognizant to their new realities. Once you've got that right, get your marketing messages honed in that amber phase. Get your sales engagement processes improved in that amber phase. Remember, you're talking to the same clients, but with different problems and a different lived experience. You're also talking about a very different economy over here. Red is to reset what will distinguish you. Amber is to get that right and to understand how you can scale it. Amber is also where you get your delivery of service right. Your ops teams, during the red phase, they should be looking how they can improve their ability to conclude and service clients. In the amber phase, they should be testing new ways of doing exactly that. If you have built these two into systems that give you distinction from your competitors, then you're at the right time and place to get your people to power those systems. You're going to have to train your staff differently. You're going to have to set different targets. You're going to have to orientate them very, very differently. They drive fulfillment. They drive momentum. And they are guided by who it is you're serving based on who you're serving, telling you how they need to be served differently. That is true customer centricity. Getting this right will release time for you to focus on next level growth. We're now moving into the grow phase, the reignite phase. That means you need to support funding and get access to funding. If you have competitors where in your business you require plant and equipment, should they have not done these 4 steps before you are at the green phase, when you have done them at the green phase, it means that businesses will be struggling. And it means you might get access to plant, equipment, stock, talent, customers for 20, 30, 40 cents in the rand. And all of this is done to ensure you're building value. You do not compromise your profitability once you enter into that green phase. If you do this right and you build scale to service a well-defined group of customers in a manner that solves a problem for them, that growth translates into profitability. Be the best you can be in the moment. We're in uncertain times, and nobody's been here before that's alive, unless you existed post 1918. And then do you have your memory today in order to share with us the experiences? Because you would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of age. It's a 1 in 100 year event, this. We know that the world doesn't understand it yet. We know that the experts, whoever they may be, don't understand it yet. But I can tell you this. Number 1, you've got to prepare a plan. Take a view on it, commit to that view, put a plan in action, but truth in the plan will only be found in action. Do what you think is right in the moment. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't work, stop doing it. That requires you to be very, very present. It requires you to be in the positive cycle of the Kubler-Ross curve. So work hard to remain there. This preparing and acting, and then trying through action as opposed to trying through advice or consultations or whatever it might be that you are relying on. It's that gives you the confidence, certainty, and clarity of how to work with your team to get through that storm. Work with your team, because without them you will be alone. And when you are alone, you run the risk of finding yourself in a very deep echo chamber.
So to come in here with some more questions, and I'll give you 2 questions at the same time, so you can go through those. Mario is asking here, how do we work with Auric to get all of this right? And Devold wants to know, he's making a comment with a question saying that South Africa is typically slow to adapt. So how do we trigger your target market to adapt as the market might not be ready?
Okay, so I'll answer Devil's question first because it's the more interesting one for me, if you don't mind. So Devil, you know what? Necessity forces change. Necessity forces innovation. This idea, when people talk about innovation, is a lot of nonsense in my view. The only time you innovate is because you have to. And the reason you're doing it is because if you don't, you will die. I'm yet to see a business truly, truly innovate because of opportunity it's identified. And the reason for it is that innovation carries an enormous amount of risk. It burns a huge amount of capital and cash, and there's no certain outcome in it. So necessity is what gets people to change very, very quickly. This could not be a better time in order to get people to change and adapt to new ways of doing things. The second part of the answer is, unless you have understood the new problem that people are facing, that you are selling and engaging to, and unless you can connect with them and demonstrate very clearly how you can solve that problem at a cost lower than the problem creates and causes for them, they will not hear nor understand how you can be of help and service. So right now, people are primed, looking for new answers, because everyone is being impacted by the COVID economy. It's up to you to get your messaging right in order to resonate with their problems and to deliver an experience that shows you've understood and heard them. So it's a two-way piece. The opportunity could not be better now, but you're going to take quite a bit of work in order to figure out the exact messaging and the exact method of pricing, the exact method of selling, the exact method of delivering, whatever your service might be. From an Auric point of view, well, visit our website. What we're doing at the moment, as you well know, Johan, both here in the UK and in the US, we are helping businesses reset, because the reset stage requires quite a bit of thought and consideration. You need to get it right. You need to get the right data out. Once we have reset and we have reshaped the business, post that for a period of 3 to 6 months, by building systems to deliver the new way of offering services, the new way of reaching clients, the new way of converting clients, the new way of managing team, training team. We then are hoping to be in a position 6 months later where we can reignite, because we are one of the few businesses left standing in that sector, that industry. That's the approach we've certainly taken to all our clients. And the reason we do that is because 70% of our fees are based on a client's revenue growth. So I've covered those 2 questions. Let me end off, because I've taken my hour with you. Recording of this webinar and other webinars are all available at this resource, auric.com. There are quite a few webinars there. Please feel free to access them. If you find value in them, please feel free to share them. No doubt, if your customers do better, you do better. If your suppliers do better, you do better too. We all exist within an ecosystem. We've got webinars there on how to negotiate with landlords, SaaS, how to manage people and team, how to digitize your business from top to toe through 4 different layers. There are books to read that we're recommending. Sweat and Scale is a book that I wrote recently. It was published late last year. The Upside of Down is a book that Bruce Woodfield wrote on businesses that were built in the darkest times of South Africa. Sweat Scale Sell specifically talks to 12 businesses, all South African, that were built against profound odds. It talks to the mindset of those business owners, and it talks to those techniques that I shared with you in part in this webinar, and how they were turned into practical action on the ground for those businesses to be built in a remarkable way. Specific questions you want answered, further topics you want covered are all there. That's Sweat Scale Sell, and there's a COVID version. It's available on Audible. If you do want to read it, if you do choose to read it, please connect with me on LinkedIn at Pavlo. Let me know your thoughts. And if you have questions based on the book, let me know your thoughts. I will attempt to get to everything and everyone. And with that, Johan, if I may, we have concluded the hour and a bit. I hope you found it of value. I hope you found it of use. Any remaining questions that haven't been shared with me, I will make an attempt to get back to you and respond with some thoughts. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Pavlo, and we thank you for your time. There are some questions that we need to be answering. There are some topics we need to be discussed. So we don't have time for this right now, but keep talking to us. This is not a time to be doing this on your own. Reach out to us, reach out to other communities, form part of business community so we can do this together. But we thank you for your time, and we talk again.